Hi there! Today I'm back with a tale of murder, confused identities, and cursed swords. She Walks at Night has everything. So, let's dive into a mystery and see if we can figure out what's going on. Welcome aboard the International Express to Book Central. Grab a seat, settle in, and let's while away the journey with some book chat. I'm your host, Jules, and today we're reading another Seishi Yokomizo detective novel. Kosuke Kindaichi is back in the house. I covered the Honjin murders a while back, and I think y'all quite liked that episode, so we're back with another one. And the exciting thing is that this novel, She Walks at Night, has literally only just been translated. It came out earlier this month. It's translated by Kirkwood, and it's published by Pushkin Vertigo. So I'm very excited to have had the chance to kind of dive right in. I had an advanced reading copy of this one and to share it with you. Because it is a very new release, I'm not going to tell you the entire plot. Instead, what we're going to do today is I'm going to detail the plot for you up until the first murder. And then I'm going to leave you. It's intended to maybe whet your taste a little bit, get you excited, get you intrigued, and then hopefully maybe pick up the book yourself. Because it's good fun. This one is really fun. It's so... well, I'll share some thoughts later. Let's maybe just get into the plot first. So that's what we're going to do. I do want to give a quick... or have a quick discussion at the beginning. This novel features two main characters or important characters who have kyphosis. I think that's how you pronounce it, which means they have a hunched or sloped back. The way they are referred to in this novel throughout is as hunchbacks. I'm not entirely sure that that is still, an appropriate term to use. I don't know if it was ever appropriate, but the way I was reading it in the novel, it felt very pejorative. I think that is on purpose. I think this novel plays a lot with who is telling you the story. Should you trust it? Are the people who are speaking to us, are they good people? So I think their use of that word maybe also indicates something about their characters. However, I want to avoid using it. So I'll be talking about these characters when I introduce them and explain that, they have a hunchback and that this is sort of a key identifying trait of theirs in the story, but we're not going to overly dwell on it. But maybe we'll get back to that a little bit later. With that out of the way, let's get into the plot. She Walks at Night begins with a little list of relevant characters, but I'm going to leave that aside for now. And instead, I'm going to give you the opening line. We start in media res, in the middle of a conversation. Chapter 1, Walk Not at Night. I just don't know what to do. I mean, she's out of her mind, completely insane. Yes, she's always been a little unpredictable, but this goes way beyond mere whimsy, and it scares me. That is how we start. And I was like, oof, we're in the middle of a conversation. We're getting excited. We're hearing about a woman who is maybe out of bounds a little bit. I love women who go out of bounds. But here we are witnessing a conversation between our narrator, our protagonist, Torata Yashiro, and the person who's currently talking to him, which is Naoki Sengoku. These two, Naoki and Torata, have a complicated relationship. Naoki is from the Sengoku family, which has always served the Furugami family, which is a very important family that owns a certain amount of land. And we're in the post-war, post-Second World War period. And because they have a lot of timber, woods on their land, they are currently making quite a bit of money, whereas the rest of society is quite poor, recovering from the war. So Naoki has a lot of money. And Torata does not. He is a struggling artist. He is a writer of crime, mystery, thriller novels. And Naoki is sort of his benefactor, except that his financial support also comes with consistent put-downs and impositions. So Naoki is currently complaining about his life, specifically a woman to Torata, who is sort of listening, but not really caring as far as we can tell. But he has to listen because this man pays him for his art. So they're drinking, Naoki is complaining, and we find out that the woman he's talking about is a woman called Yachio. I'm doing my best to pronounce the names correctly, but I'm not sure I am. So thank you for bearing with me on that. Yachio is the daughter of the Furugami kind of patriarch. He died a while back, but she is his daughter from his second marriage. And apparently she's a wild child. And Naoki's like, I don't know what to do with this woman. She is insane. And the reason that Naoki is involved with this Furugami family is because his family, the Sengoku family, they're kind of like stewards for the Furugami family. They've been closely involved with his family for decades, nay centuries. And so his father, who's called Tatsunoshin Sengoku, is currently sort of stewarding the family, keeping it together now that the patriarch has died. On top of that, we also find out that he's probably having an affair with that patriarch's second wife, the mother of Yachio. And it becomes quite clear that a lot of tension is circling around Yachio. She's currently 24, and the reason that Naoki thinks her behavior has gone too far is because she's decided she wants to get married. And Torata is like, well, is that a bad thing? Also, why do I need to hear about this? I actually don't care. And Naoki's like, no, I'm telling you, okay? Because I know that you have to listen to me and you will not tell anyone because you don't have any other friends. So Torata doesn't really have a choice and he has to keep listening to this. As Naoki's trying to explain why this marriage is such a bad idea for Yachio, he has to go back in time, about 6 months a little bit, when there was an incident at the Cabaret Hana. What happened at the cabaret is that a group of young men came in with a woman who was beautiful, but no one could give a good description of her in the aftermath. Some said that she was this modern young woman. Others said she was like a traditional beauty. Some said she had gaudy clothes on. Others said she looked refined. And the reason that we needed descriptions is because somebody got shot at the cabaret that night. The person who got shot was an artist called Koichi Hachiya. Hachiya is one of the characters in the book who suffers from a hunched back, but this hasn't stopped him in thriving in the art scene. Torata does tell us that he thinks his art is a little bit ugly. He doesn't have a great impression of Hachiya's artistic output, but then Hachiya also doesn't respect him as a novelist. So it's a two-sided dislike. But basically, these young men had come to this cabaret with this young woman. Then suddenly Hachiya shows up and she's like, "You monster!" And she shoots him and disappears. Hachiya survived, but no one knew who this woman was, what was going on. And everyone was like, well, maybe it was just a case of mistaken identity or something. Oh, well. And this is also what Torata knows of that incident, that it was a weird situation, but Hachiya survived and recovered. So, well, all's well that ends well. Now, Naoki tells him that actually it was Yachio who was there that night, who got a bit tipsy in the town, and then shot Hachiya. But what makes it weirder, because that's already maybe a bit weird, is that then she went to the hospital where Hachiya was recovering, sort of introduced herself to him without telling him that she was the one who shot him, and the two developed something of a relationship, and now she's getting married to the man that she shot 6 months ago, without him knowing that she's the one who shot him. The reason that this is a whole thing is because the Furugami family has something of a curse, is how it's put in the book, attached to it, which means that the male members of the family all suffer from hunched backs. This means that Yachio's elder brother, Mori, also has a hunched back. It gets weird. I should maybe put a little warning in here for those who are extremely grossed out by incest. Although it doesn't actively take place in the book, the lust and intention is there. So Mori is technically Yachio's elder brother, but he's in love with her and he wants to marry her. And apparently, like many noble families before them, the Furugamis aren't fully opposed to this, except Yachio is not really interested in marrying her older brother. Naoki complicates all of this by saying that most likely Yachio isn't actually a Furugami, but is his sister, so the daughter of Tetsunoshin Sengoku. The patriarch Furugami basically decided to accept her as his daughter. All very confusing. We're not entirely sure whose sister Yachio is, but we do know that her legal technical brother, Mori, wants to have a passionate love affair and marriage and happy life with her, and she's not interested in that. However, shortly before this incident at the cabaret, all of this, by the way, is being told to Terata by Naoki, Yachio began receiving letters because when she was born, a prophecy was made that although she would not have a hunched back, she would marry someone with a hunched back. And that's why her brother, Mori, was then like, that's going to be me. And now these letters start arriving that are like, yes, you will marry someone with a hunched back, and it's going to be me, ha ha ha. But she doesn't know from who these letters are coming. And they receive more letters, and she shows these to Naoki, and she's like, what am I doing with this? One of them features a photo of a man with a hunchback, dressed up very nicely, except the head is cut off in this photo. So what is happening? So everything leading up to this night at the cabaret, Yachio was basically sort of being hunted/haunted by this prophecy. And then she saw this artist, Hachiya, and she was like, it's you've been sending me these letters. And then maybe she felt a sort of intrigue/remorse and visited him afterwards. And now we're at this place where back at the estate of the Furugami family, Naoki explains to us that not only is there Yachio, but she's also invited Hachiya, with whom she's now sort of engaged on the path to marriage, ? But of course her brother Mori is there as well, who's deeply unhappy about another man courting his sister. And Yachio's mother, Lady Oryu, is there, and of course Naoki's own father, Tetsunoshin Sengoku. None of these people are getting along. And Naoki's basically like, I need an outsider who is on my side, but also technically not involved, who can help me figure all of this out. And Terata's like, I have no interest in getting involved in your entire family drama. This sounds insane. Why must I be there? Because Naoki is his benefactor, Terata does have to go. Terata makes his way to this estate, which is just outside of Tokyo. Apparently, it's a beautiful house. It's sort of a mix between traditional Japanese architecture, but also modern Western design. And as Terata and Naoki arrive, they immediately start hearing that there is something going on. There is a woman laughing, there's potentially a man screaming, and they make their way into this estate, and they suddenly see three men chasing each other. The one at the front who is being chased is Koichi Hachiya, the artist, who previously got shot and is now engaged, potentially, to Yachio. He is being chased by Tetsunoshin Sengoku, the father of Naoki. The issue here is not just that an older man is chasing a younger one while he's clearly drunk, but that he is holding a katana. So he's chasing this young man with a sword, and this does upset Naoki a little bit. The third man that's chasing after them is one of the gardeners who's like, can we please not? At this point, Hachiya falls, and Tetsunoshin almost kills him until Naoki intervenes and is like, this is embarrassing, Dad. He takes the sword, the katana, away from his father. Hachiya also sort of gets a final jab at this old man and then runs away. And Terata's just standing there like, what is this? Is this how your family always operates? He's already over it, and he's only been there for 5 minutes. Then they enter the house, and that is where Terata is introduced to Yachio. She is beautiful, but there's clearly something also mysterious about her. I will say that Yachio is a bit of a... She's not a manic pixie dream girl, because that's a Western thing, but she is this kind of female character that is full of allure and danger and beauty, and she's sensual, but maybe she's also off her rocker, right? So it's there's not a whole lot of depth to her, but we should always also remember who is telling us this story, and it's very clearly being narrated on purpose from a male perspective. So she is sitting there playing the piano, and Terata's like, oh my god, she looks just like her mother, who's also beautiful, but she also looks a little bit more modern. There's something in her face. And then he sees someone he thinks must be Hachiya, because this is also a man with a hunched back. But then it turns out that that is the brother, Mori, who is unhappy about even more guests at his estate. And it's a tense situation. We also find out why Tetsunoshin was chasing Hachiya. Apparently, it is the anniversary of the patriarch Furugami's death, and so Yachio's mother, Lady Oryu, was sort of like nicely dressed up and trying to have a good day, and Hachiya was sort of flirting with her in front of Tetsunoshin, and as we know, that older man has been having an affair with this woman, and that was enough to get his blood up. The alcohol didn't help, and that's why they ended up chasing each other. But the main question Naoki has is, how did my father get this freaking katana? Because, Yachio, you and I hid it. So, how did he find it to go chase this artist that you've invited to our house? Now, it turns out that whenever he gets drunk, Tetsunoshin is a very big fan of finding this sword and trying to kill someone with it. He hasn't killed anyone up to this point, but the sword feels a little bit cursed. It's kind of like Chekhov's gun, right? We know that now that this sword has been introduced, something is going to have to happen with it. And Tetsunoshin had actually asked Yachio and Naoki to hide the sword so that he couldn't find it. And yet somehow it was just right there in his wardrobe for him to pick up when he got into a drunken fury today. And this is why Naoki then turns to Terata and is like, see, this is why I wanted you here, because weird things are happening in this house. Who put that sword there for him to find? That evening, dinner is very awkward because Hachiya, the artist, has sort of gone off in a huff. He's like, I can't believe that this is the kind of house that leaves weapons around for guests to be murdered. And Naoki's like, well, you have been annoying to my father, so maybe you could stop being annoying. And Terata's like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And Yachio's like, why are all these men in the house, even though maybe I sort of invited at least one of them? So, dinner is awkward. At some point, Yachio goes upstairs to bring some food to Hachiya, who has decided to stay in his own room tonight. And the men are not really having a good conversation. Terata decides to get a little bit drunk, and at a certain point, Naoki goes up to figure out where Yachio has gone, and he makes Terata go with him. They see Yachio kind of walk out of the corridor where Hachiya's room is, and her clothes are kind of in disarray, and she has a bruise, and they're like, well, this is not good. And Mori himself, so the brother, while he's quite a vague character, he has so far not done a whole lot, but we keep getting these descriptions of how he seems like a man on the edge of something, right? He's been quiet and withdrawn and sort of the butt of every joke for most of his life. And it might just be the time where he's had enough of it. There's this anger sort of curdling in him, right? So Terata's like, we should also probably keep an eye on this dude. But everyone goes to bed. And Naoki is quite nervous about this whole thing with the sword, with the katana. He's like, I actually need someone to help. Naoki takes Terata to the family vault, basically, and they lock the sword away. Now, the vault has two-factor authentication. Even back then, it requires two things. It requires a key and a password made up of kanji letters. Naoki has the key, and he asks Terata to put in a password so that neither of them can open that vault on their own, right? Naoki can't open it because he only has the key, and Terata couldn't open it because he only has the password. And no one else has either of those, so the sword should be fine. No one can use this sword. The tension is high. Naoki just wants it away. He then also asks Terata to sleep in his room with him, and he kind of shoves like a little sofa for him up against the door of his bedroom, and he's like, you sleep there. The two can't sleep because it's been a tense night. Terata's also had a little bit something to drink, and at a certain point, they hear noises in the corridor, so they shuffle everything aside, open up, and it turns out that it's just one of the maids who has just gone to give Hachiya something to drink because he rang a bell and asked for some water. And she's like, I'm sorry. And they're like, no, okay, that's fine. they still cannot sleep. So around like 1 a.m., they look out, they are smoking a cigarette out the window, and they see Yachio walking. And at this point, it becomes clear that Yachio has her own kind of curse. She's a sleepwalker, hence the title. She walks at night, right? And she's currently just traipsing around the estate, and Terata's like, should we do something? And Naoki's like, no, this is just something she does. She'll be okay. The next morning, our two main characters, our protagonist, narrator Terata and Naoki, wake up and they're like, well, maybe it was a quiet night and not that much was going on. But it is already around like 10, 11 a.m. So the house is very quiet and they run into the maid from yesterday, Ofuji. And she's like, yeah, Yachio is still sleeping. She doesn't really want to see me. I haven't seen the artist Hachiya or her brother Mori anywhere, though. That's a bit odd. And just as they're about to have this conversation, they're interrupted by a piercing scream. And they're like, oh no. It turns out that something has happened. And so Naoki and Terata rush into the garden. They follow the gardener, Yomota, who has found something. They follow him to this little cottage. Now, this cottage has already come up earlier because Hachiya, the artist, had told our narrator, Terata, that Naoki apparently kept a woman there and only sort of rushed her off a few days ago. And Terata was like, okay, that's weird. Why is he keeping women in cottages in his garden? But we'll put that aside for now. But that will turn out to be relevant, of course, because everything is relevant. But for now, they run to the cottage. And what they see there is a headless body. Yes, a man that they know has been murdered and his head has been cut off. What complicates the matter is that this is a man with a hunched back. Where is the artist Hachiya? Where is the brother Mori? Which one of these men is it? They've removed the head. There's no identification possible. What are they going to do? And that's where I'm going to leave it when it comes to the plot. So, thinking back, I'm trying to figure out if I have in any way explained this clearly. Going into like the first third of the book, you're trying to figure out this network of characters and how they are connected, right? It's sort of the fact that we have an external character as a narrator, which is always important with these kind of family murder mystery vibes. But we have two families, the Sengoku family and the Fuhogami family, which is so closely intertwined and has been for centuries. We have a woman whose paternity is not entirely clear. We have brothers who might be interested in their sisters. Another side thing, Naoki might also be interested in Yachio, but, well, his father might be her father, but that's not fully clear, so he's also conflicted about his feelings. And then we have this artist who seems to be very annoying, but, well, that doesn't necessarily mean he should die. And when we got to this first murder, I was quite intrigued by this idea of, oh, yeah, do we know who has died? This is where some of the difficulty comes in with the use of kyphosis or hunched backs in this novel, that you're like, well, surely these two men look different in many other ways, right? This doesn't override their individuality, but there is quite a lot of effort made throughout the book to also establish that, like, no, they also dress in the same way. They are physically quite similar in other ways. And once you remove the head, well, then a body does change when it no longer has a head. You're not always quite as sure who you're looking at when there's no head attached, I imagine. So yeah, from here, we, of course, at a certain point get the introduction of our beloved Kosuke Kindaichi, the detective of this series of thrillers and mysteries, and I still love him. So in the other books centered around him by Seishi Yokomizo that I've read so far, I feel like we get more of an insight into Kosuke because our main character is usually his assistant, sort of helps him out a little bit, or he's at least constantly butting into the conversations of other characters. In this book, Kosuke Kindaichi is a little bit more distant. We don't get to see quite as much of him, but there is a very good reason for that. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm really trying to talk around a big spoiler. And I would say, and well, this might be a moment to have a conversation about spoilers. For me, with reading, it's about the journey, not the destination. I don't really mind spoilers because if knowing something about the plot takes away the entire pleasure of reading a book, then I think maybe the book isn't very good. Because I have with great pleasure reread books, rewatched films, series, etc., fully knowing like the outline of the plot and certain details, and I've still enjoyed the experience of going back to it, right? I do appreciate that with thrillers/mystery novels. That conversation is perhaps a little bit different because so much of the enjoyment of the reading comes from putting clues together. So with thrillers and mysteries, I would be a little bit more hesitant to move into that spoiler territory. And that means that there's a couple of things about She Walks at Night that I would love to talk to you about that I cannot because I don't want to spoil it for you. Because obviously the mystery is like, who is committing these murders? And how we get there is this source of consistent frustration, but in a fun way. And because our protagonist, our narrator rather, is a crime detective novelist himself, right? He's sort of thinking up of motives and like what a good story here would be. And we know from other Kosuke Kindaichi novels that Kosuke also likes thrillers. And so it's also very much a novel about what are the stories we tell, right? And obviously they're here with these two families. We have these stories of cursed generations, swords that may or may not be haunted or cursed in their own way. And all of that comes together to kind of create a story that's really rich in many ways. Yeah, so I had a really good time with She Walks at Night. I love the twist. I saw it sort of coming, I'd say about maybe 10 pages or so before it was officially revealed. I started being like, no, hold on. I'm connecting the dots. And the payoff of it was really nice. And it was well earned. And it makes sense, which is always important with twists. Be they in thrillers, in fantasy novels, whatever. A twist needs to be deserved and it needs to make sense, okay? You can't just do it for shock value. Please, people. I will say, so I mentioned it at the beginning when we talked about the use of kyphosis and these two sort of important male characters both sharing that sort of physical, I guess, impairment or maybe just feature, I don't know. I'm not super fond necessarily of how it is used because it becomes such an identifying factor that the rest of their characters kind of fade away a little bit. And I'm also not majorly fond of the female characters. Or rather of how the female characters are written. I think there's sort of very intriguing stories there, especially with Yachio, and that doesn't get a whole lot of space. Now, having read other Seishi Yokomizo and Kosuke Kindaichi books, I know that Yokomizo can do that. So it's again, that part of the characterization is a part of like, who is telling us this story, right? When Naoki is talking to us about Yachio, we don't need to take all of that at face value. When Turata arrives at the estate and sees her and kind of puts all these things on her, we don't have to take that at face value either. So one of the fun things of the book is kind of puzzling through who's telling us what, right? And whose perspective we're getting. And yeah, I also thought what was really interesting was the way the novel mildly, it's not a major point of it, but it is very present in both the background and at a certain point in the story itself. This setting in post-war Japan, the fact that some of these male characters, they've had to go off to war. How has that affected them coming back in? Like, what does the art scene look like just after such a big disruption? How does this play into the dynamics between families, especially families in a country that had a very strong hierarchy, feudal system? Some families are, the lords and others are servants and stewards, but how does that work out when something like a war changes all of these dynamics? I found that a very interesting element that played into the background of it. I think now you have something of an idea of She Walks at Night, of this latest Kosuke Kindaichi series book by Seishi Yokomizo, which has been translated into English. I would highly recommend that you read it, as long as you're aware of how it treats kyphosis and that its female characters are maybe stereotypes a little bit. But again, remember, Always remember with thrillers, and in real life, actually, always remember who is telling you a story. The source should always be considered. So, on that slightly ranty note, I think I will leave it there for today. Do let me know how you feel about spoilers if you have strong feelings about it. I appreciate there might be some spoilers that ruin everything, but again, if this piece of art is good enough, a spoiler cannot take it away. That's it for today. If you have questions, thoughts on the book, or recommendations or requests for future episodes, feel free to leave a comment or send me an email at bookcentralpod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. You can also subscribe to be informed when new episodes drop. You can find references to the materials used today in the description. Book Central is written and produced by me, and our music is by Scott Buckley. Thank you for joining me today on the International Express to Book Central.